Hello everyone, welcome to today's PDU session. Today we'll be exploring ways of engaging learners in our online lessons. We're all devastated by the news of the earthquake, so if you have relatives or friends or even students there, I hope they're all in good health and they're all safe. Um, so um, so today we'll be talking about ways of engaging our learners, which is actually a very important topic. We'll be looking at the issue from a more general perspective. I didn't structure my presentation only for ways of engaging learners in online contexts, because whatever we will be talking today actually applies for both traditional classrooms and online classrooms. So today we'll be talking about this, thinking over this very important issue. But before we move on with more serious stuff, I'd like to, lift the mood a little by showing you some illustrative scenes from my favorite comic strip, Calvin and Hobbes. Okay, so today we don't have these traditional classrooms, physical classrooms. We do have such students, don't we? Okay. Sometimes they're rebels. Okay. Sometimes they reject whatever we do in the classroom. They even reject schooling and attending lessons. So we have some students, but these are the extremes, and sometimes they just don't care. I think they're more in number. They have their filters and barriers between us. Yeah? Sometimes they just cover up. They're just polite enough to, not to show. They seem as if they're there, but actually they're not. They're present with their bodies, but without their souls in the classroom. So we have quite a lot of number of students in this mood as well. And sometimes they try, but still they fail. So it's really difficult for them to be there at the heart of learning. And it's really difficult for us to keep them there, even to take them there. So it's actually a very big problem that our students suffer from, lack of engagement, disengagement. And it's not only a problem that concerns only our students, but it's also a problem that concerns the teachers, us. Actually, it's more of a problem for us than to them. Because we're there for them. I mean, our ultimate purpose of being a teacher is to make them learn, is to help them on the way, is to help them with their education. But when they're not there, then it's totally meaningless, So sometimes it's really disappointing. Sometimes it's even heartbreaking when you see that your students are there because they have to. This is compulsory, English courses or your elective courses. Maybe elective instructors, elective colleagues are also among us. Maybe they have a different, word. I mean, because they're, elective languages, students might be more engaged in those classrooms. But in whichever context we might be in, still there is this problem of disengagement. So it's an important issue to think over. So we will be talking about this, but before we do, I'd like to ask you any keyword or any phrase that you would come up with that you can somehow relate to the idea of disengagement in our classes. Any reasons can you think of? I mean, why do you think our students are suffering from this problem? Why is it difficult for them to be in the classroom somehow? Why is it difficult for them to be engaged in our activities? What might be the reasons behind this set of mood? Can you, write in the chat box just a few ideas that you would relate to the reasons of disengagement? Why do you think our students are not very interested in our courses? Or why do we have this sort of student psychology? It doesn't have to be related to you know, their interest levels maybe, but why do they have such a state of mood? Any ideas here? So I'm going to check my chat here. Confidence, self-confidence, okay, anxiety. Thank you, Funda Hocam. They're anxious, huh? They're not feeling confident. Low self-confidence. So confidence seems to be important. That's what I get from your responses. Topic or materials being not appealing to their interests. Thank you, Tamay Hocam. So true. More enjoyable options, değil mi Funda Hocam? Like, I don't know. Playing games or hanging out with friends, which is not something that they can do today anyways. So the background experience, how so true, Hocam. Thank you very much, Filiz Hocam. Yeah, YouTube videos are much enjoyable. They're more active. They're better planned. Maybe there's this human factor here. Not everything is very ready, and not everything is very enjoyable in a classroom setting. But yeah, and you can always forward the YouTube video. You can just choose the part that you're interested in. Değil mi Jason Hocam? You're so true. That's really important. Priorities are different, Hale Hocam. Doğru. Especially when, in our context, değil mi Hale Hocam? So we have this, compulsory language courses that they have to take, and it's, we're service departments. They have more important priorities like their departmental courses, and it's okay and it's fine. Of course, their departmental courses are really important for their lives, so they don't see it as a priority. That's so true. Comfort of home, online. That's the problem we're facing today. And maybe at some point in the presentation, in the session today, we can discuss, is it more difficult to engage students in our online classes, or was it even more difficult in the class? I don't know. I'm curious about your responses actually, because I have different, sometimes I think online classes are, better in this sense, but sometimes it's more difficult. I really couldn't make up my mind about this. Lack of interest. At the end of the day, it's all about interest and attention. Değil mi Melek Hocam? Thank you very much. As a burden on top of their real courses. So very much in line with what Hale Hoca has just said. Attitudes and beliefs. Çok doğru. So what beliefs do they have as students? Maybe it's about their background experiences again, the schooling experiences. Unrealistic. Are we asking them, for example, things that are actually unrealistic? So they cannot relate it to their lives, Hocam. Nil Hocam, I think this is what you mean. So relevance issue. So we'll be all talking about this. The material is not at their level. Yeah. And unfortunately, this term, we've been talking about this with our colleagues in our CT program. It seems that the student profile in terms of their language levels are a little lower this term. So that's a problem. So we may want to, adjust some of the activities this term. So true, concentration, attention. Why do they have this concentration problem? Is it about us, about us as the classroom instructors, or is it about more related to their time, to the context around them, the technology they're surrounded with? So true. Yeah, difficult year. Yeah, yani, every day something new happens. It's happening. So true. Level of awareness, gap between real life, so relevance problems again, other priorities, assignments, courses, biases. Focus time, focus span, concentration span becomes limited every day with each new generation. And I think this is what we're feeling in depth. Benefits, relevance issue. So you see, actually, we're always, showing some common, using some common keywords, and we're saying similar things. Yes, tiring, relevance. Classroom atmosphere, that's where we can, do something maybe in being passive. Again, it is about the classroom setting maybe. Interests. Okay, thank you very much. This is a very good list arkadaşlar ya. Thank you very much for your contributions. Exactly. So you see how many different components we have that somehow relate to the idea of engagement. And I think there is no single concept, in the discussion of education that is not somehow related to engagement. So it is being affected by so many variables. Maybe motivation and engagement are the only two terms, key terms, that are being affected by all concepts related to education. So it's really important to think over this engagement issue, and this is what we're going to be doing today. As you can see, most of the time, and also from your list I could get, most of the time it's about what we do or we don't as decision makers, as educators, as their classroom instructors. So sometimes, of course, it's about them. It's about their state of mind. It's about their psychology. But most of the time, it's also about what we do as school administrators, decision makers, committees, and classroom instructors. So this means there is a lot we can do. And this is what we're going to be thinking over today, what we can do, how we can engage our students. Arkadaşlar, how are we going to proceed today? First of all, we're going to set the stage. Actually, we've done it a little. Thanks to your great responses, we've set the stage, looked at the reasons. And when we identify the reasons aslında, it's easier to identify the solutions. So it just tells you, basically. And then we will be moving on with discussing some key terms, especially the relationship between attention, motivation, and engagement. How are they different from one another and how are they related? And we will be looking at learner needs. I have selected some sample literature about learner needs because it's going to be a good foundation to talk about ways of engaging students. And so we'll be looking at some mini, ideas or some mini strategies that may help our students be better engaged in our classrooms. But arkadaşlar, I should tell you at this point that this is really not something new. Actually, whatever we're going to discuss today, whatever I'm going to show you in my slides today, are things you already know. So this is not new information, and I'm not going to be giving you a magic stick which would turn your students into engaged individuals, of course. But this is really not new information, but it's still good that we're here together. It's good that we've met just to, think over some important concepts and to maybe it's good to get inspired from one another. And that's the ultimate aim of this PDU session. So thanks for joining.
Elif'ciğim, sorry to interrupt. Before we move on, shall we maybe try without the earphones because there's a problem with your voice. Yani bir cızırtı var somehow. Okay.
Maybe. Is it now?
Okay, it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot better for me. Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought it would be better, but because I'm moving a lot, maybe.
No, it's okay. Better now.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks for the warning there, Mojam. Such improvements always make a difference. Thank you very much. All right. So this is how we're going to proceed today. Okay. So let's set the stage. Arkadaşlar, to set the stage, I think it's good to start rethinking about our own practice. So what are the roles we have? What are the roles we possess as classroom instructors? Okay. Are we recognizing ourselves as the designer of learning experiences? Actually, we are. We are the designers of learning experiences. Are we considering this question, when it comes to student motivation, low student motivation and engagement? Now, we may have textbooks, we may have syllabus, we may have all the guidelines and criteria, all the rubrics, everything settled for us, everything clear. We have the weekly schedules and everything. But at the end of the day, it's always the teacher, it's always the classroom teacher who designs the learning experiences. So you choose your own topic, you choose your own reading articles, and especially in our departments, we have this type of autonomy and this type of freedom, which is very valuable, okay? And so in our departments, we're even more responsible for everything we do in our classrooms. So although we may have all sorts of guidelines and rubrics and syllabus and schedules and everything, still it's the teacher, the classroom teacher. So you are sequencing your activities, you're choosing your activities, you are planning your lessons. So you are the designer of the learning experience. So first of all, we have to settle this down. We have to accept this. Whatever happens in our classroom, it's related to our design, okay? Another thing we need to consider is, this question: are we highlighting the importance of putting learners at the center of the learning process, at the center of this design process? I'm sorry. Okay, so who is at the center, or what is at the center of your design process? So maybe this is just a moment to think about, to make a self-reflection, to make an honest reflection. You don't really have to write in the chat box, but I just want you to take your time, take your moment to think about it. When you're designing your classes, okay, what is at the center of your design process? I think that's a key question, arkadaşlar, which would solve most of the problems we may have in terms of student engagement. What is at the center of this design process? Is it sometimes practicality? Maybe. Now think about your classrooms, think about your lessons. Is it sometimes our comfort zone? Of course it is. Yeah, no one can deny that. For example, I rejected, leaving WebEx because it was my comfort zone, but maybe Zoom is a better option. I don't know. Okay. Sometimes maybe it's the textbook. So we want to follow textbook page by page because it's easier. It's related to practicality maybe, or maybe it's the time that we put at the center of our design process. Maybe we don't want to fall behind the schedule, so we speed up. But are our students learning acaba? That's something we need to think about. So is it all these other things that are still important, or is it your students at the center of your design process? So when you shift this to the students, when you change this the role of the students in your design process, everything changes actually. It's so interesting to see how everything changes. The way you would want to do things would change. And by the way, please don't get me wrong. I mean, it's all fine to think about practicality, and it's all fine to think about comfort zone. So there's really no problem with that. But it's still also important to consider where our students are, because this is what we do is just for them, basically. Okay, so another thing we may consider to set the stage for ways of engaging learners maybe is to think about conditions for learning. So we all know that learning improves when students are interested and inspired. And just like that, learning tends to suffer when students are bored or dispassionate, or somehow when they're not interested. So this is very important. This is the condition for learning. So think back on your classes. If they're really not very interesting, if they're not very inspiring, or if they're ways of boring students, then you wouldn't be expecting much learning there, because this is the condition for learning. This is what I get from the Glossary of Education Reform, but this has been emphasized in so many articles in the literature as well. Yeah. And besides thinking of our roles, our design process, and the conditions for learning, it's also worth thinking about the conditions of the outside world today. So today's conditions, our time and our conditions today. So we know that many students drop out due to online education. They're not happy with online education. Maybe it's because of lack of socialization, or maybe it's because it's difficult to follow classes in online settings. You know, I really like the the expression we used to have, the digital labyrinth issue. You remember from our English 101 book? Sometimes they feel lost in all these online settings surrounded by technology. Maybe they're lost in this digital labyrinth and they want to just quit. And in one of the articles from Bambara, I saw that it's 50% greater. I mean, the dropout rates, 50% greater when compared to traditional dropouts. And this is even before pandemic, so it should be even higher today. So we need to consider the difficulties of online learning. That's what we need, something we need to keep in mind. Another thing is the massive data that they're surrounded by, all this technology and everything. And eventually, you know, this results in difficulty of paying and maintaining attention. They're so much surrounded by all these technologies, and they're multitaskers. Their concentration spans are really, you know, limited. And we have all these challenges around us, arkadaşlar. And this is another criterion. This is another factor that makes it very difficult for us to keep them engaged in our classrooms. So these three, you know, things, issues to consider before we design our courses might be a good starting point, I thought. Okay. So as a result of all this technology, as a result of all these challenges, as a result of the context we're in today, attention seems to be an important issue. And it's an important issue we need to think about. And we also need to think about how we can help them attain their attention, because as it's said in this quote, it's the ultimate currency of our classrooms. If our students are not attending, if they're not attentive, if they're not paying attention, then they may not learn, they may not be learning. And attention is also important because it's very much related to engagement itself, because engagement actually is about the degree of attention, curiosity, and interest, and passion. Passion is a strong word. Do they have passion for learning? We're not there. But do they have attention? Do they have interest? Maybe. Okay. Mercer and Dernier, you know, these two people are very much into motivational theory and engagement. They propose a simpler definition, which I really like. They say engagement is the active participation and involvement in learning activities. Simple as that. And when we mean disengagement, I mean, we don't necessarily mean the students only who are present there with their bodies, but without their souls, like people who are sleeping, people who are, you know, checking their mobile phones all the time. So they're disengaged anyway, okay? So they're not with us anyway. But sometimes when a student looks engaged, when a student is, you know, pretending like he or she is listening to you, he or she may still not be engaged. So there's this difference between behavioral engagement and cognitive engagement, which we're going to mention a little while later. So are they actively participating? Are they somehow involved in the learning process? This is the question we need to ask in our classrooms, in our lessons. So if there's a discussion going on, for example, are students willing to participate in the discussion? Do they have something to say? If there is some, you know, if there's some discussion, contributed by many different students, then we can say that, yes, there's engagement now in my class.
Okay, so we need to make it concrete, actually. You would want to see it concretely. So collaborative activities, group works, discussions, that's why they're very suggested activities, because they lend themselves to increasing engagement. At this point, you might be considering the difference between motivation and engagement. And I'm not going to be getting into motivation today very much, because motivation is a very deep issue. It's really something we can talk for days and weeks maybe, but just to show you the relation, motivation is an internal state that arouses behavior. It's more about the psychology, it's more about the internal state of people. So it explains the potential of learning, whereas engagement directly manifests itself in classroom behaviors. So engagement is more visible, but motivation is not very visible. It's something internal. Okay, but of course it sets the mood. But is it a prerequisite for engagement? Actually not. It's not a prerequisite for engagement. A very good metaphor at this point I'd like to show you is this one. It prepares the deal. Engagement seals the deal. And even when there's no motivation, students can still be engaged. That's interesting. But this has been emphasized and repeated in so many video conferences I watched and articles I skimmed about this issue. So even if a student is, and the vice versa is also true, even if a student is motivated, if the student is not engaged, he or she will not learn. So you can look at the issue from both sides. They're not prerequisites to one another. A very motivated student can still be disengaged and so will not learn. And even a student who is not motivated to English classes can still be engaged in your tasks, in your classrooms. Is this possible? Think about it. I think you have all, felt this. I don't know. I mean, as classroom instructors, you know that some students are not motivated, but somehow they participate in your discussions. They sometimes, actively become present in your classrooms. Don't you have such cases? I'm sure you do. So it's really not much about motivation. Of course, it prepares the ground and it's the ideal thing. But even when students don't see a reason for being motivated to your classes, with good task selection, with good social bonds, with good lesson planning, they can still be engaged. So it's more visible than motivation. Mm-hmm. Okay. So engagement seems to be even more important than motivation in educational contexts. That's my personal point of view. And so it's very important. So it's very difficult. There are things we need to do, stages of achieving engagement. Mercer says that, first of all, we need to prepare the ground. We need to create some willingness for students to be engaged in our classrooms. Okay, and how can we do that? We'll be talking about this. And then we have to, trigger engagement. We have to get them doing something. I don't know, like starting a discussion, starting a very active task. I don't know. So you trigger engagement in some way. And the most difficult part now comes, as you might also presume, it's keeping them there. Maintaining engagement. I think it's the most difficult part. So it seems that we have a long way to go, and there are some stages to achieve engagement on the part of the learners. But actually, it's not really very difficult, with small ideas, with small tasks, with just really, really small things, we can actually have them, make them more active in our classrooms. And those little things we'll be talking about them today. But before we talk about those little things, maybe we may want to have a look at some summaries of learner needs. I mean, these are some of the summary materials I got from the literature, so I'd like to share them with you. As for the learner needs, because when their needs are met, they seem to be more engaged, of course. We may have a look at some of these summaries here. And one of them I like is from Fisher, because he introduces us the concept of invitational education. I really like this phrase. Our classrooms lessons invitational? Okay, so he says for a classroom, for a lesson to be invitational, you need to have trust in your social community, maintaining positive relations, connectedness, maybe arousing or raising some spirit of community. I don't know. So is there trust? Do our students trust us as their instructors? And is there also shared trust among students? Can we say that our classrooms are places of positive relationships? Yeah, very important. Actually, that's the starting point. That's the foundation of engaging classrooms. And respect. I think trust and respect go hand in hand. When there is trust, there is respect. So this is not something we would be, working for. If we can, create an atmosphere where there is trust, respect will automatically follow. This is my personal opinion. So, but when our students, come up with ideas, are we respecting their opinions? And do we ensure respect among students? So sometimes there are contrasting viewpoints. Sometimes we have people who are at opposite sides, and sometimes we talk about social issues, political issues. Sometimes some issues, are raised in our classrooms. Do you see a sense of respect in the classroom? Can we enable it? That's, again, an important question to think about. Is there optimism in the classroom? Is it a happy place? Is it a happy place? Is your classroom a happy place? I think it's very important. And do you have the intention as the classroom instructor to, ensure trust, respect, and optimism in your classroom? I hope this was valuable to you as it was to me, because this is really something that shows us the way actually to start. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to see the relationship of what Fisher et al. Suggests with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So once our students are in good health, once they're secure and safe, okay, do they have psychological safety? Is there trust? Is there respect? Do they feel comfortable in our classrooms? So I think it's very parallel to what Maslow suggests in his second letter here in his pyramid. And social relatedness, bonding, the community spirit. It's about the upper ladder of the pyramid: connectedness, relatedness, community building. Whichever text I read about engagements, if there's something common, if there's only one thing common about engagement, it's social bonding, arkadaşlar. So important. And as you just mentioned in our chat, self-efficacy, feeling confidence, very important. Mm-hmm. So you can, take Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a roadmap, or the one I've shown you before, while designing your lessons for better learning experiences. Another summary I'd like to show you is from Jones and Jones, and they say feeling important and secure in the learning environment, understanding the goals. So this goes back to your responses again in the chat box: relatedness, seeing the relevance, seeing the meaning behind doing those tasks or practicing those skills maybe. So why am I doing this? This is important. Having time to integrate learning, so some retention time. So this is maybe something that would make us consider the sequence of the activities we follow, or sometimes maybe our speed. Are we rushing too much? Are we more concerned about not falling behind the schedule? You know, our students need some time. And, you know, in our online settings, I think this is very possible because we have the chance of, you know, giving some time to our students asynchronously. You know, when it is asynchronous learning time, you know, they can, you know, wrestle on this information. They can do more practice. They can, you know, watch the videos, and, you know, this will give them some time. And receiving feedback. And number 1, feeling important, and number 6, receiving feedback, I think are very interrelated. So when students get responses from their teachers, of course, they feel more important and they feel like they're taken into consideration. So feedback also comes into play. And I couldn't, you know, disregard what Deci and Ryan in their self-determination theory suggested, because it's very related to motivational theories. Actually, they're also founders of self-determination theory, which is related to motivational theories, you know. So they say relatedness, competence, and engagement should be there in order to have engagement in our classrooms. So relatedness, seeing the relevance, competence, self-efficacy, and autonomy, having some agency in classroom activities, in classroom settings, in the decision-making processes. So we will be looking at each of these, but this is, I think, a very important summary before we move on. Okay, welcome back. So far in the first part of the session today, we talked about our roles as teachers, the difference between engagement and motivation, our challenges, our contexts, and also we, you know, considered some essential questions that we would want to keep in mind when designing our lessons. So that's what we did. So we set the context and we set the ground. And now let's talk about those little things we mentioned, you know, at the beginning of the session, you remember? So it's really important to keep them engaged, and it takes some time and effort to do this. But, you know, by using, you know, mini strategies or doing something extra, you know, sometimes, actually we can make it happen. Yeah. Sense of solidarity, how so true. Fiz Hocam, thank you very much. Yeah, and in the meanwhile, when we were in the break, you know, some of my friends here talked about whether it's easier for our students to be engaged in online classrooms or not. And some of my friends, some of my colleagues here said, actually it's easier. They're feeling more comfortable, more confident in front of the screens. So maybe this is our experience. So we're learning a lot during this online experience, during this online education process. And yeah, maybe they're feeling more confident, and that's an opportunity for us, because, you know, taking them there also takes a lot of time. But there are also other things we can do even to foster more better engagement. Yeah, okay, so what can we do? Okay, so we'll be looking at some elements that would contribute to feeling engagement. These are little things, arkadaşlar, small ideas. So, and I'm sure you have I'm sorry, there's a problem with my screen. Huh? Okay, I'm sure you have all your ideas as well. So I would be very happy if you would be sharing them with me during the session. So we'll go on. Okay. So whichever text I read while thinking about this session today, there is one thing that was not overlooked in any of the texts, and that's building a sense of community. I think that's the started point. And actually, Sarah Mercer and Zoltan Dernier, they say it's the foundation. If there's no sense of community, then there's no engagement. It's all meaningless. And when there's no engagement, there's no learning. So all those, icebreakers or mini activities that we do, at the beginning of, each semester, they're not waste of times. Actually, you can do it even more. Especially in online context, maybe it's even more important because we cannot come together face to face with our students. It may take a little even more time. And the ADRO period is now over, and you may have new students, you may have new lists in your classroom. So you may want to take some time to, raise this community spirit in your classrooms. So I just summarized it as building a sense of community, but different people, different articles, mean the very same thing by using different terms like relatedness between the teacher and the students, relatedness among students, among the group as a whole, social connectedness, and, student-teacher, student-student rapport. So they're all about the very same thing, actually. So engagement is our willingness to engage in learning. Our willingness to engage in learning is strongly affected by our social relations with the group. So that's the idea behind raising this community spirit. And this relationship model should be multidimensional. So it should be between teachers and students. And of course, it's also important to have good relationships among students. So in different, dimensions, we need to be able to see this. So when you are learning about your students, you may also need to, consider, are my students also learning from one another? Are my students learning about one another? That's something we also need to think about. So I don't know what type of activities you've designed to build some sense of community, but it's not about only us learning about them, but it's also about them learning from one another, learning about one another. And I really like this quotation, so I wanted to share it with you. Shifting from a geographic-specific idea, geography-based model, to a relationship-based model is more important. And actually, that's what it has to be in our online settings, because we're not zaten meeting them in a geography. We just have virtual geographies this term. So relationship-based model. So it's not about coming together, but it's about, the feeling of togetherness in virtual environments. And how can we do that? Maybe, we can think about it. And in another article, there is this mutual relationship being emphasized. So it's the close, caring teacher-student relationship and high-quality peer relationships. And then we can have more engagement in higher school performance. So performance also raises when there's more engagement, because it's about learning anyway. Okay. So it's not one-dimensional, but it's multi-dimensional. Just let's keep this in mind, okay? Another thing I would like to add to the social connectedness issue is about caring about their pedagogy, as suggested by Mercer. So we talked about effective communication, including empathy, social connectedness between the group members, including the teacher. But it's also about pedagogical caring. I think that's a very nice addition that Mercer makes. So I wanted to include it also in my slides. Are we caring for our students? That's one question. Are we caring for our students' learning is another question. Are they learning? Is there anything else I can do to help them learn? Is there anything else I can do to help them improve in this, in terms of a skill we introduce, for example? Any activity I should design to make it better, practiced, better learned, maybe, I don't know. Okay, so it's not only about, you know, the social connectedness, learning about their, you know, characteristics, their hobbies, learning their names. These are all suggested activities, yes, but it's also showing them that we care about their learning processes. So feedback, for example, giving quick responses, immediate responses, the feeling of empathy when they have, you know, problems at a certain task, and trying to help them on the way are, you know, very important and life-changing. So, can you now think about some of the things that you've been doing in your classes? I'm sure you've been thinking about it anyway. So while I'm talking, I'm sure there's this cognitive, you know, process in your mind, reflecting back to your classrooms. And I'm very curious about that. So would you please, you know, share them with us? So you may use the chat box again, but simple things you do to build some sense of community in your classrooms. I'm sure you have beautiful experiences, and I'm sure you have good suggestions about how we can do that. So let's, you know, take our time to reflect on what we are doing in terms of connectedness. Any ideas from you? I'd like to welcome your ideas here on the chat box, please. What do you do? I know, for example, some of my friends did a speaking task, you know, students talking about themselves, students talking about their lives, about their hobbies, about things that they're interested in. Hatta I know some of my friends did it over some tools like Flipgrid, you know, and the others responded. This is a beautiful community building activity, for example. It might be even something smaller, you know, a question on the forum or a question in your lesson. Let's see. Okay. Get to know each other games at the beginning of the term. 2 truths, 1 lie. Okay, Derem Hocam. This is a very, you know, traditional activity, 2 truths, 1 lie, but I think it works perfectly well with our students, even with adult students. It works really well, and there's the fun element present in this one as well. Getting to know activities, group works. Group works do not have to be around, you know, social bonding activities, actually. Any type of group work. So thank you, Filizcim. Any type of group work, even when it is about a certain skill in our textbook, for example, it is still about building community. So I'm there with you, dear Filiz, yes. Some speaking tasks in the breakout rooms. Harika. Yeah, Melek Hocam, I think that's the simplest but the most effective thing to do. Melek Hocam wrote, allocating a few minutes to ask how everything is going in their lives. So how is things, how is life? Are you doing fine? Any news you'd like to tell me? Anything you'd like to announce? Any important changes in your lives? Are your midterms starting? Do you have assignments? Is it a busy time for you? Such questions at the beginning of each class. Exactly. So little mini chit chats with your students. I think they're perfect ways of building sense of community. And use of breakout rooms, Jamboard and Google, and to collect ideas, materials there. Exactly. Interactions via Padlet, because everyone sees others' responses too. That's why it's interaction. When there is interaction, there is building communities. I agree. Some of my friends here use WhatsApp. Okay. Find someone new activity after Flipgrid. Oh, that's great. So they told you, Herald, they told you about their lives. They introduced themselves to their peers probably. And after this Flipgrid platform being done asynchronously, that's what I get. Değil mi Gonca hocam? In the class, in our synchronous class, in the synchronous class, find someone who activity. Okay, and this also checks whether they listen to one another's videos or not. Peer feedback on Jamboard, breakout rooms, small group activities, every opportunity to communicate. That's beautifully put. Thank you, dear Duygu hocam. Giving feedback to one another, to each other. I mean, students giving feedback to one another, speaking tasks. Okay, so you see the chat board anyway. Peer feedback. Free forum. Yeah, dear Özgür hocam. Yeah, forum I think is a great platform to consider for community building activities. Just, just like Özgür Hoca does, movie recommendations, TV series. Okay, what would you recommend? Or let's have a class, I don't know, song list, for example. Such things would make a huge difference. I agree. Group work assignments, Tama hocam. Are we using more group work acaba in online settings? That's something, I don't know. I think we are. Breakout rooms. Because we're not lecturing all the time, maybe that saves us precious time. Yeah. Music. A very important element to bring everyone together. I agree. Dear Jason uses music. Yeah, another getting to know about one another activity, forming groups of students and asking them to find common points. A very good one. Videos on WhatsApp. That's an interesting idea. I'm somehow hesitant about WhatsApp groupings, but I don't know. It seems some of my friends here enjoy the experience. Spotify list together and listen to it. Yeah, that's also in my list, dear Azer hocam. Yeah, so you see, you all have your great ideas, and thank you very much. So instead of me giving you suggestions, işte you've given one another a lot of beautiful suggestions. So there are a lot of things we can do. Just try to, it's something that I'd like to add here, just try to make it ongoing and somehow continuous. So getting to know about one another activities or getting to know activities are not things to be done only at the beginning of the terms. So let's do it in an ongoing fashion to, strengthen the sense of community. Thank you very much for your responses. They're really valuable. Okay, so learning names. I think we need to start here. Now, I think it's easier because you see the names just next to their camera. Next to the boxes, next to the cells on your screen. So it's easier maybe to associate names with faces this term. But using names when addressing the students is very important, as we all know, because they make them feel important and they make them feel taken into consideration. And helping them, use learn the peers' names and encouraging them to use the names of their peers might also be a good alternative. Okay. Inviting students to participate without forgetting anyone, especially if you're sharing screen, you're not seeing everyone. That's the big challenge. That's the difficulty I face in my online classes. I'm sure you also experienced the very same thing. For example, you're checking something, you're checking homework, or you're discussing things, and you want you want your students to respond. So if one dominant student talks all the time, that might change the mood in the classroom. So inviting different students to participate, showing them that that they're there even behind the screens, that they're present there, and somehow explicitly showing this to your students might be a good alternative. I am using the wheels of names arkadaşlar. I think you're going to find it very useful. Name of wheels, which one? Okay, I'll check that and will write to you. Wheel of names, if I'm not mistaken. So it's like a wheel of names. You would put the list of your students, the names of the students there, and you know, you have the wheel of names, and once one of your students talk, you can just take him or her out, so you would know who hasn't talked so far. It's a very good tool to be used in any of your classrooms. So inviting everyone to speak and participate as a principle, important. Sharing something personal and being yourself. This is much emphasized in many texts I read, arkadaşlar. Just share something personal about yourself, share something about your life, sharing something from your home. I don't know, showing something. I mean, we have our teacher's role, but we also have our, you know, individual roles as their not friends maybe, but we're not only teachers, but we're also human beings, and it might be good to share something personal as long as it's appropriate, of course. I think that's a good way. They see a connection. So talking about the challenges around you or things that makes you down. So such personal feelings, sharing of such personal feelings will also make them connect to you. So you can also talk about how busy you are or how you're feeling that day. That's, I think, a good idea too. And letting them share something personal. I don't know who she was. Derim Hoca mentioned one of our students playing the guitar. So that's a very good example for this one, making students feel safe in the classroom. So as a classroom, as this community, I mean, in this community, we're feeling safe, we're comfortable. I think that's the foundation of everything. Okay. And one of the best sentences I've heard in relation to the social connectedness is this one. I'd like to share it with you. Be interested instead of interesting. I think that's worth thinking about. Okay. So it's about building some community. We can also do it with our task design. So actually we talked about it. I was going to ask you some, you know, tasks that you use to, yeah, like group works. You mentioned group works. Tasks you do that you think are contributing to the idea of engagement here. So you mentioned them actually, but can you write down some adjectives, okay? Just some adjectives to define an engaging task. What kind of tasks or what kind of activities do you think are engaging? Group work tasks, yes, that's what we have in our chat box. Any other, arkadaşlar? Any other adjectives? Meaningful, yeah. Okay. Personalizable. Okay, difficult word. Challenging. Challenging at the optimum level, neither too easy nor too difficult. Thought-provoking. We want them start thinking over issues, right? Challenging content-wise, fun at times. How so true? Yes, and collaborative activities. This would also be contributing to social connectedness. So one stone, two birds, something like that. Anyways, okay. Thank you very much. An authentic, participatory, inviting, manageable, challenging at the optimum level. I totally agree. Thank you for your responses. Mercer and Dernier comes up with the acronym, you know, CLARA, challenging, learner-centered, collaborative, yani, active. Are they actively doing the task? Is it relevant? Is it valuable, meaningful to their context? And is it autonomy rich? Do they have freedom? Do they have sense of freedom while being involved in this task? I think that's a very good definition of a good task, which would lend itself to engagement somehow. And it is very parallel to what you have just stated in the chat box. So thank you very much. So we're there. Fisher et al. Also mentions the importance of content. So it's not only the relationships, like we discussed in the first item, it's not only the relationships and social bonding, but it's also the content being meaningful and being relating to the students. So it's the teacher-student relationship and their relationship with the content, the material itself. So when we see a good relationship among these three concepts, there is optimal learning. Is the content meaningful? Is it interacting with the student? Is is interaction with the student? Is there, connectedness towards one another and towards the content as well? Then we can maybe talk about the presence of optimal learning there. Okay. So this is again another good quotation I'd like to tell you, I'd like to show you. So you might think we're giving them something, but are they taking it is another question mark. So engaging, collaborative, active tasks that are meaningful would be easy to engage in as part of the students. So, I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation today, there's this difference between behavioral engagement and cognitive engagement. And when students are, when students are behaving as if they're, following the course, still, it doesn't mean that they're cognitively engaged. Are they cognitively engaged in the classroom? We may all think about this as well. I mean, they seem interested, but are they acaba thinking over the issue? Are they producing something? Are they creating something? That's why discussions, arkadaşlar, I think is one of the best alternatives we have here, because when students are discussing, they're cognitively thinking over the issues. Socratic seminars, for example, are perfect alternatives for truly cognitively engaging tasks. Very similar to this differentiation between behavioral engagement and cognitive engagement. So it's not about compliance only. The fact that students are doing a task, the fact that students are, doing their homework, or the fact that students are answering the question, it doesn't mean that they are engaged. Maybe they're just complying, or they're just busy, but maybe they're not engaged. So discussions, Socratic seminars, truly collaborative tasks, exchange of information, information gap activities, where they need to think, where they need to actively do something, that's when students are really engaging. They're not just busy, they're not just complying, but they're engaging. Okay, so please, think about this difference between business, compliance, and engagement. They're totally different from one another. Okay, so all types of group and pair work practice when they're actively doing something. Socratic seminars, as I mentioned, information gap and information exchange activities. So there's a meaning behind doing it. So they have to tell their friends what they have at hand. So this is not business. They have to cognitively engage in the activity. Peer-edited performances, learner-generated materials and quizzes. This has been suggested again for more than once. So they can come up with the questions. For example, we all have our CBTs, and we will be doing CBT text discussions. Why don't you create a forum on ODTÜ and ask for certain questions that you can use in your Socratic seminars or in your text discussion lessons. I think that's a beautiful way of engaging our students. And when they will be writing their questions, we know that they have to know about content, they have to read the text, so they will be cognitively engaged in the task. And they come up with beautiful questions, very effective questions, even harder questions, yani. So I really advise you to think about this issue. I know some of my friends in the department have the habit, have this tradition of asking their students write down questions. I know some of them. So I think that's a very good idea if you're looking for alternatives of student engaging tasks. that's something you can go for. Yeah. And besides engaging, besides collaborative tasks, we can also think of differentiated tasks in terms of content, process, and product. When our students feel they're left aside, when our students feel that they're not addressed in some way in the lesson, they may not be feeling engaging, of course. So we have students from multi-levels. I mean, we have students with different backgrounds. We have students with different proficiency levels. We have students from different places, even from different countries. So thinking about differentiating some of our content, processes, and products might also be a good alternative to consider for engagement. How can we differentiate our content? You can give your students some checklists or surveys to ask about their opinion and to, use these opinions when designing your tasks, for example. So I know that a lot of my friends in the department ask for students' opinions for the CBT tasks, for example, their topics, because the topic would come from the students, they would be feeling more engaged. Alternating tasks based on students' proficiency levels, I know this is really difficult. It's really difficult, but sometimes this is doable. And this doesn't have to be done in every class, but sometimes, you may go for relatively easier tasks, and you may go for relatively more difficult tasks maybe at times in order not to be too challenging for the low achievers in our classrooms. Sometimes, how can we do it? For example, giving the freedom of the medium expression and discussion brainstorming tasks. So if you let them go, if you refer them to Padlet or Jamboard, just give them freedom. Some of them might come up with only keywords. Some of them, it's okay if some of them come up with sentences. Some students would come up with images that would describe their contribution, maybe, I don't know, but giving them the alternatives. Arkadaşlar, you can just write down keywords or sentences or phrases, or you can upload an image. You can do it asynchronously or synchronously. You can even upload an image that would represent your idea. I don't know, but giving them some sort of freedom in the way of expressing their ideas might be an alternative to differentiation. Assigning shorter paragraphs to low achievers in a jigsaw reading might also be an alternative. When you refer them to breakout rooms, for example, Atatürk's text, integrity is a more difficult issue to understand than, for example, courage, bravery. Most students would quickly understand what bravery is, but integrity is a little harder. So of course, this is very much at the very beginning of the term, so we may not know who are the low achievers and high achievers, but you can apply this example to your future assignments, your future lessons. Giving relatively easier paragraphs to relatively low achievers and more difficult paragraphs to more proficient students might be an alternative to think about in order not to make them feel bad about their performances, in order to increase the idea of self-efficacy maybe. Assigning listenings asynchronously is a perfect way of, again, differentiating our tasks, because for some of our students it's difficult, but if they do it at home, they can listen to it more than once. That's differentiation, and a very easy one. Giving alternatives in writing, that's again a way of differentiating our content. So one of your prompts might be easier than the other one. So more proficient students would be going for the harder question anyway, but just also give an alternative to your students who wouldn't be able to do that hard prompt, okay? So they may go for an easier one. So using alternatives in our CBT, for example, task sheets, giving different prompts is a very good alternative for differentiating among students. Providing spelling vocabulary lists at the readiness levels of our students is another idea. So these are little things, but I think would make a big difference in the minds of our students, in the psychology of our students. And it's not only about the English language instructors here. These are also very doable in our elective language courses. So let's also consider, you know, differentiating our content. How can we differentiate in terms of process? Progressive staging of the activities, starting with an easier one and moving on with a harder one. From skimming to close reading gibi, from paraphrasing to writing a cited paragraph gibi. Okay, so this is about differentiation of the process. From listening to a TED Talk with subtitles and taking notes. Okay, so let's not always head towards the very difficult, because we have all sorts of students this term, arkadaşlar. And you know, presenting your ideas in different modes might also be a good idea. And at times when they need, you know, meeting with small groups, of course, upon request, might also make them feel more confident and comfortable in your classrooms. Student leaders in breakout rooms, I'm sure you're using this idea, like there would be a spokesperson or a student leader who would be, you know, a more proficient student maybe. Okay, and how can we differentiate our tasks in terms of products? You know, of course, for the graded performances, we cannot do that, but for non-graded things, we can, I think, accept oral, written, or visual alternatives, like on Padlets, on Jamboards. They can be writing, or they can be speaking and uploading their speeches. So give them the flexibility. If the idea is asking for their opinion, asking for their contribution or idea about an issue, I think they should be free to do it in the way they like. I think they should be free to do in the medium they like. So this is something to think about. Just, you know, think about this issue and write a paragraph. Instead of doing it, you can write a paragraph, or you can send me a mini presentation, or you can, I don't speak and, you know, record your voice, you record your video. These are possible, but not for the graded assignments, of course. This is necessary because we have all sorts of students from different proficiency levels, experiences with education, cultural backgrounds, and situational factors. You know, we're having a different, interesting time these days. So we have all sorts of challenges around us. So that's why you may want to think about differentiating as much as collaboration. So this is another criterion we need to think about in terms of our tasks, arkadaşlar. Okay. Okay, and self-efficacy, you mentioned it already, growth mindset, competence. These are some other words that can be used interchangeably in relation to self-efficacy. So basically it's about, you know, Bandura's term here, self-efficacy is, you know, people's beliefs about their potentials, their beliefs about what they can do about themselves. Are they feeling confident? Are they feeling safe? A very important component of engagement. So they continue to explain that a strong sense of efficacy enhances accomplishment and personal well-being. And we get over our challenges and problems more easily when we're having more self-efficacy. Optimum challenge level is important here, neither too easy nor too difficult. And this goes hand in hand with the differentiation issue I just mentioned. So just think about this when designing your tasks, arkadaşlar. Setting realistic goals. So I'm not going to explain this because it's very obvious anyway. I very much like the idea of exit tickets at the end of each week, or at the end of each skill, maybe exit tickets. Like I remember Buket in our 101 meeting, she mentioned, you know, just go, you know, go to the Jamboard and write down 3 things you learned or something you need more information about, kind of exit tickets. Or they can just write down on a piece of paper on a Word document, or you can create Google Forms or Google Docs. Things we've learned this week, or things you need more practice about, and things you're confused about, you know? That's a perfect way of checking your students' understanding, checking your students' performances. And it's also good for differentiating. You would know where they are. You would know what you need to do extra, maybe, if they need. If this is too much detailed, you may even ask them to write on the chat box something we learned today. Arkadaşlar, please use the chat box and tell me something you would remember from today's class. This is an exit ticket, and it's a perfect way of wrapping up a session, don't you think? So these are small ideas, but they work really well in the long run. And if you can do this, if you can set such a routine, and if you can set a routine like this, exit tickets at the end of each week, at the end of each chapter, maybe, asking about their ideas, differentiating between tasks, putting more emphasis on collaboration instead of giving lectures. I think this will make a huge difference in the process, in the long run. Okay, providing smart feedback, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Feedback is another issue, so I'm not going to get into this. We don't have much time, but it shouldn't be very late. It should be meaningful. It should be constructive. And instead of saying very general remarks like good work, or işte you should study harder, or this is vague, this is all vague. They wouldn't be able to understand. So measurable, specific, and timely feedback is good for changing attitudes, is good for self-efficacy, and it's good for engagement at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. A very mini, small idea would be to come up with a whoop statement from your students, maybe once or twice during the term. You may ask them to set themselves some goals. Motivation is very much related to goal setting theories, like they may come up with their wishes, their outcomes, obstacles, and, ways, some sort of plan that they would follow in order to achieve this goal, achieve this target, reach this target in some way. This might be, again, a perfect activity for auto-class forums, arkadaşlar, once or twice. You don't have to do it all the time. You can even do it once, maybe before the actual term starts. We're just over with the add-drop period. You can do it now, or you can do it in the middle. I don't know, or you can do it even at the very end of the term. So what are your plans of improving your English from now on, kind of? Self-reflection is good not only for teachers, but is also good for our students, of course. Another component, arkadaşlar, is agency. I'm speeding up a little. I hope this is not too fast. This is all things we already know. So I don't think this is too much overwhelming for you, because we already know. Agency is about choice and voice. These two expressions I really like, saying them together. And autonomy. Do they have agency? Do they have this? Do they have the decision-making role in your classrooms? Please think about it. This is, again, a self-reflection time for you. Is everything determined by you as the classroom teacher, or are your students deciding for the processes, even for sometimes the assignments, even sometimes for the graded assignments? I don't know. Think about it. Do you sometimes ask for their choice? Do you sometimes ask for their voice? Do you sometimes ask how they would like to do it? Okay, this is what we should do, but how can we do it? How would you like us to do it? This makes a huge difference. A simple question makes a huge difference. The message is there. You are important for me. I care about your interests. I'm comfortable for you, okay? So when you give out this message, I think you gain a lot in response. So agency is one of the fundamental, factors that we need to consider when it is time to consider about, engagement. So agency. Oops. Okay, seeing your students as agents who are able to influence their context, their classrooms, their lessons. That's, I think, key for participation. And it is the capacity to exercise control over one's thought processes and motivation. do they have control over this lesson? Do they have control over their 211 courses, elective courses, our English 101? Do they somehow have a voice in your lesson? You can ask them. I don't know. Yani, very easy. Can you, okay, I don't know. Do you ever offer choice to your students, arkadaşlar? Let's think about it. Let's skip this chat box issue because we really don't have much time, but think about it. I will move on, but I know that you're, thinking about this question, I hope, okay? Anything that students can decide, they can decide on some of the products, some of the processes maybe. Think about it in your context. Okay. They can come up with their own articles sometimes. The classroom material can come from them. They can decide on the interaction patterns. For example, you may ask them to write a group paragraph, but if one student wants to do it individually, please give this freedom to this one student, okay? He or she should have the freedom to write it individually. Don't you think so? I don't know. Why would we, why would we force our students to do things in the way we want? Maybe they want to do it in a different way. And that would be the best way, actually, because that would be more suitable for their context and for their psychology, maybe. So individual studies, group studies, you can change the interaction pattern by asking their opinion about, asking about their opinions, and even products. Yani. Arkadaşlar, shall we do it in a recorded session, or shall we do it? Would you like to do it? Would you like to record your voice and send it to me, or would you like to do it in a synchronous class in front of your peers? How would you like to do the speaking assignment? Okay. Would you like to do it orally or written or in a visual format? I don't know. Maybe some students would like to come up with posters about an issue, about leadership, for example. What do you understand from leadership? You can come up with a poster, or you can write a mini paragraph, or you can talk about it. Okay, so in their asynchronous time, they would plan and prepare it, and then, they can, show these products, share these products with you. Wouldn't it be possible? Think about your instructions, arkadaşlar. Please, time for self-reflection. Think about the other graded assignments or non-graded assignments, okay? Do they have some choice? Okay. Another thing I'd like to mention is the relevance issue. You all mentioned it in our chat box. Thank you very much. How important it is to relate what we do to outside world, not only to their departments though, to the outside world. So explaining the value, purpose and meaning of it. And by the way, in my personal opinion, something we do in class doesn't have to be perfectly related to their departmental courses. It's still okay if it's a life skill, okay? Arkadaşlar, you may not be doing it in your departmental courses, but a university student should know about this. You need to know this is a life skill, okay? Even, giving this information makes a huge difference because they think, okay, what am I going to do with this idea? Yani, I'm not going to be writing anything anyway, because some departments don't produce much writing. But as a university student, you should be able to construct an idea and put it on paper. This is a life skill. It's not only about your academic studies, Showing them the meaning makes a huge difference in their minds. Okay, sometimes they're adults, yes, but sometimes they're also young enough not to be able to make this relationship. So please make it concrete. Please don't leave it to be implicit, okay? And reminding your students that no matter what, mastery of some L2, be it English or any other language, is key to the accomplishment of their life goals, not only for their departmental courses, but also for their lives and professional lives in the future, of course. Okay, very quickly, arkadaşlar, I want to do this. Maybe just a few responses will be enough. Can you write down, paired keywords that would show the relevance of what we do in class to something outside the class, like paraphrasing in academic papers. Any other pairs you would come up with? Just think about something, reading material, reading articles even, okay? How would you relate it to things outside the classroom? Can you come up with pairs like this? Hadi, let's get one or two from you. Okay, thank you very much, Filiz Hocam. A very good example, synchronous presentations. Yes, yani, okay, let's give them choice, but sometimes we can force them to do certain things because it's a good life skill for them. Arkadaşlar, let's get over with this anxiety issue. This is what you will be doing. Hadi, let's practice together, hani kind of a safe environment. Exactly. Thank you very much, Filiz Hocam. That's a very good example. Any other examples, arkadaşlar? Even citation. Citation seems to be a very, isolated thing, maybe, but it's good for their academic studies, right? Now I'm waiting for other responses. Maybe you can think about it, and if you come up with a new one, extensive reading. I think this Figen Hocam, right? Critical thinking, logical reasoning. How so true. This is a life skill, right? Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. This is a very good pair. Figen Hocam, exactly. Okay. So even if you cannot come up with pairs right now because it's short time and we're, rushing up, please think about these pairs when designing your courses, when delivering your lessons. Make sure you mention the relationship between what we do in class and what we do outside the class. And there's even further discussion. I really liked it, but we don't have the conditions today. We have a lot of students, we have a lot of work to do. There's too much workload and too many number of students, and we have all sorts of challenges and problems around us. But once we have the perfect setting, maybe we can think of doing culture festivals, language festivals. And that was an idea in one of the texts I read, and I loved the idea. Maybe we can do some facilities to show them the importance of language learning as a department. And it would be in cooperation with our elective language instructors someday, maybe someday. Okay, curiosity. This is a small element, but sometimes it works. Adapting a discovery approach, adding elements of unpredictable items to your lessons. Discovering lesson-related content instead of telling them what citation is. Referring them to an academic text and asking them to identify what citation is, or what the relationship between an in-text citation and an-text citation is, for example, would be, arousing curiosity, and they would be doing it themselves, finding the relationship. Are they different names or are they the same names? What is the relation? Why is it long here and why is it short here? Kind of, discoveries they can make themselves. So lesson-related discoveries, but also mini activities for raising curiosity, not necessarily related to the lesson itself. I really like this idea, and I'm using it in my classrooms, like setting up a routine every week in your synchronous class to give out a motivational quote or a health tip or a life motto. That would be a very small idea, but your students might be wondering the health tip of today, or they may be wondering a motivational quote. And this would also be good for their life well-being. Again, two birds with one stone. Hatta, you can do it in this way. Giving phrases or words individually at random times during the course. Okay, just a keyword in the middle of the class, another word in the beginning of the class, another word later, and then at the end of the class, okay, now see the keywords I gave you today, and these are in jumbled order. Make your motto. What motto motto or what motivational quote would you come up with these random phrases? I think that's a very good idea. You can try that. And they would be expecting the other one. They would be expecting the other one during the class. But of course, this shouldn't be very distracting, arkadaşlar. If you feel that this would be distracting, you can just, give these little health tips at the end of each course, maybe. Or just like Jason just said, or Özgür also mentioned it, if I'm not mistaken, composing a list of favorite songs to be played before each class during break times. Aha, my teacher, and today, it's my song today, okay? Whose song is this? I really like this one too. Hani gibi. This is good for curiosity. This is good for social relatedness, a Spotify list for each of your section. Wouldn't it be a perfect idea in many ways? Or, for example, Tony Hocam does this, creating time for student voice at the beginning of each class or at the beginning of each week. I don't know. You can, determine the of course. Some time for student voice. They can talk about things that are important in their lives. Doesn't have to be related to the class content necessarily. Anything you'd like to share. So today, for example, Zeynep will be sharing something with us. I don't know. You can think about such elements of adding such elements of curiosity in your classrooms. Okay, just like I did with bulletin board. You remember we together bulletin board. I used to facilitate arkadaşlar. Each month I would give you a 1-question survey. You remember? You can do it with your students too. And you can share the results of the survey questions in your synchronous classes. That would be lovely. Or forum questions on ODTÜ class. Be lovely. So many tricks, many little things to change the mood and to make it a better place, a happier place for your students. When your students are happier, when your students are, feeling safer, they're more likely to engage, they're more likely to learn the content as well. And games, drawing on humor and increasing some team spirit is good in that purpose. We're not a department that has a lot of time for gaming, gamification, but once or twice, sometimes you can play, fostering positive emotions. You can play games. I'm sure you have your suggestions. You can put it in the chat box if you like, arkadaşlar. Some of them I could come up with might be Quizlet, Kahoot, Jeopardy games, and there are all sorts of tools on the internet. You don't have to prepare your own Jeopardy cards or bingo cards, they're all available free on the internet, or you one get one in speaking sessions, for example. I don't know. I'm sure you have other games you can think about. So this is not a very big idea, I know, but scattering some game elements in your classrooms once or twice might also increase engagement. So I didn't want to disregard it. Okay. And this quote, I also shared it in the first PDU session, socialization, which is very important, community building. It's not only about, chits and chats, but it's also something to be done through tasks. Okay, and that would be my final remark, arkadaşlar. And these are my references. Okay. Thank you very much for being here, for attending, for participating, and for being such engaged colleagues. You were with me all throughout the time. Thank you for your comments on the chat box. And thank you for spending time with me today, because I know we're all very busy. We have all sorts of problems, challenges, it's a difficult time. And you have your courses, your lessons, I know, but thank you. I think for me, it was valuable time to be with you and to, to think over some important issues. Although we know about all of this, it's good to get refreshed at times. So thank you very much, arkadaşlar. Any questions or any comments, arkadaşlar, you'd like to make? I hope this was not too fast or overwhelming or too repetitive. I don't know.
No.
I hope this was useful. Thank you very much, arkadaşlar. And I know
Çok
some of
teşekkürler.
may have their classes, arkadaşlar. So please feel free to leave if you have classes. Thank you very much.